Welcome to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. Oktoberfest might be the biggest beer festival in Germany, but that doesn't mean it's the only one worth going to. Not by a long shot. As you'll hear on the show today, the country overflows with lively beer festivals year-round. Events that blend tradition with revelry and will provide you with lifelong travel memories. And there's nobody better to guide us through the world of German beer festivals than Franz Hofer. Franz is an expert in German beer culture who writes for esteemed drinks publications and plans beer-centric European trips for travelers. It's all in addition to running his own sensational beer and travel website called A Tempest in a Tankard. Franz takes us on a tour of 5 of the best, giving us insight into their backstory, in addition to serving up some personal advice on what to drink while we're there. Grab a beer, pop the top and settle in, because it's going to be a good time. All right, let's go to the beer fests.
Find the gap between the train and the platform.
Welcome back to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. Franz Hofer, the man behind A Tempest in a Tankard, one of the best blogs about beer and travel in Europe out there. Franz, welcome back.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for that really kind introduction. You really didn't have to. I'm happy to be on again.
So this is the sequel. We started out at Beer Gardens, and like most sequels, it should be as good or better. The German Beer Festival. What comes to mind?
I'm sure that the first thing that comes to mind, and I think this is the reason why we're trying to go beyond it, is obviously Oktoberfest. Bands, Lederhosen, Dirndl, liters of really tasty beer tents, this kind of thing. So I mean, that's kind of what everyone thinks of when they think of a German beer fest. But there is so much more. These festivals are tied to cultural history in a very real sense of the word. You know, these could be things that started off as religious festivals, or they could be festivals that started off as agricultural festivals. And eventually, beer became a central focus of these festivals. As a matter of fact, Oktoberfest, which we're not going to talk too much about today or at all, started off as a wedding and an agricultural festival. And so you see some of these similarities cutting across other beer festivals in Germany, but they really are quite a bit different than what we think about when we think about beer festivals. In the English-speaking world, what we'll talk about today are very different from the big beer tents and bands of Oktoberfest.
Obviously, these are, in the light of travel, and there couldn't be a better way to connect with locals and experience these towns, these cities, these regions at their most authentic.
Absolutely. And I mean, this ties in wonderfully with one of your big themes, rail travel too. I mean, you can get to all of these festivals by train, and that's half the fun of it too.
That's why I'm a big fan, because you're also always tying in the rail travel to things, and it just goes part and parcel with exploring Europe. And that's why I'm just so always beating this drum on the rail travel, because it's like it just is so quintessentially European.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
Normally we don't kind of go in a rundown type setup here, but today we're going to do it. We're going to talk about 5 German beer fests beyond Oktoberfest. Wink, wink.
Mm-hmm.
Franz personally has done the hard work and is going to share the knowledge with us. Let's get going. German beer fest beyond Oktoberfest, number 1.
The Oktoberfest is named after a mountain near Forchheim, which is on the train line, we're talking about trains earlier, between Nuremberg and Bamberg. Now, I'll just cut straight to the chase. This is probably one of my favorite beer fests. There are all sorts of reasons why this is the case, but one of them is this is the only beer fest I can think of that is on top of a mountain. And, if anyone knows of any that are on mountaintops other than the Oktoberfest, please correct me.
If you know of one, please send a letter to Franz over care of Rails, Ales, and Old Towns, and we will get a correction now.
Better yet, send a postcard. This is what makes this beer festival what it is. I mean, I can't think of too many other beer festivals in the world where you can get a beer from any number of 20 odd, really awesome Franconian breweries. And you can sit there looking out at this really expansive view from the mountain. And, you're there, there's the smoke rising from the grills of the bratwurst and the fish that they've skewered and stuff like that. And there's they have little rides for kids and everything that they've somehow schlepped up the mountain. It's just crazy. And families are there, hikers. Not only is it on a mountaintop, but it is a mountaintop that is completely shrouded in legends and myths of pagan festivals and old religious rituals that go back to Saint Walpurga. This might ring a bell for people who are fans of literature or music. Walpurgis Night. We all, some of us maybe know that. In English, it is the evening before the 1st of May, and it is the evening when the witches run rampant. I personally haven't seen any witches up there, but not yet. So Walpurga, she was a missionary, active in Franconia, and she was canonized in 870 Common Era AD, however you want to say it. While she was alive, she was tasked with building this chapel in honor of God on this mountaintop. And so she couldn't do it herself, so she basically cajoled all the witches on the mountain to help her build this chapel. The chapel's still there. I don't know if Walpurga actually had a hand in building it, but there's a chapel up there. In return for the witches helping her out, she said, okay, you guys, you folks can just like rule the roost on April 30th, which is Walpurgis Night. And so, of course, the townsfolk and villagers who lived at the foot of the Walberla mountain weren't too happy with witches running around and all the stuff that could happen to their livestock, and it was scary and stuff like that. So
it brings down property values and the like.
Yeah, there goes the neighborhood. So they'd burn bonfires. They would do, they'd put pitchforks up in various sort of forms to try to ward off evil spirits. And then they would also eventually start, brave the night and make pilgrimages up to the chapel on the Walberla. So that's how the festival sort of got started. And one can assume that liquid courage was a big part of these rituals and festivities. What we don't know is when the witches kind of left the building, so to speak, and it became a beer fest in the way that we understand it today. But at some point it did, and more of it did into a beer fest, and it is one of the premier beer festivals, in my opinion, in Franconia, if not in all of Germany, because you've got to get up this mountain, which is really cool. It's only for 3 days in May, around May Day, or a weekend kind of thing, and it just has this really wonderful selection of Franconian beers. So that's what really, for me, and that view, you just can't beat the view and the vibe.
When you got there and you've got a beer in your hand and you're looking out of that view, what are you thinking?
Wow. I'm here. I can't believe I'm here. It's just, this is just so unique. And a bit of an insider tip, if you like beer hiking, stay in Forchheim or in Ebermannstadt. Basically, there's a cute little train that connects these two, a town and, more or less a, town/village. The Walberla is, I think there's a reason why it became kind of like a sacred mountain. It's a dual saddle mountain. So you've got two summits on either end of the saddle. And then where the Walberla itself is, where the chapel is, it's in the middle of a second saddle that is on the northern edge of the main saddle. So it's a very unique, topographically it's very unique, and there are a lot of like rock outcroppings too, and so you're wandering through these little villages and you got the Walberla just kind of like there the whole time. It's not a huge mountain. You're not gonna, you don't have to be in really awesome shape to get up it, but that's part of the fun, spending 4 or 5 hours, maybe having a beer along the way, and then getting up to this beer fest. And then as you get closer, you might be the only person setting off from Ebermannstadt or Forchheim, as you get closer, there's like more and more like you're like rivulets of people joining together, hikers coming in from other parts of other little towns and villages, and then all of a sudden you're like it's like a procession up to the this holy site, which is now consecrated by beer, and then you know and you got like these fit Germans who are like in their maybe late 20s, early 30s, pushing their baby carriages up the. That's the other thing too about German beer festivals. It's for the whole family. Like they're pushing their baby carriages up, or they're towing their kids up. Like, come on, let's get up there. It's time for beer.
And we should probably, right off the top, mention, a refresher on Franconia.
Oh, sure.
It's a sub-region of Bavaria,
Mhm.
famous for its brewers.
Absolutely. Franconia is very special in terms of beer in Germany. I mean, it is in Bavaria, but it's sort of it's a beer region in its own right.
What are you seeing when you wander over to the side, and what are your views of them?
I'm seeing a vista framed by rock outcroppings. And through those rock outcroppings, I'm seeing a valley opening up. And that's the valley that sort of runs from Nuremberg up to Bamberg. But on the other side of the valley, that is where the basically where you're getting to Ebermannstadt, and that's where Franconian Switzerland begins to form. You got this very large valley, and then you got this smaller valley, and you've got all these rock outcroppings, and you're seeing farmland, you're seeing rolling hills, you're seeing little villages, church like steeples and stuff like dotting the surroundings, and it's just kind of a special view. I mean, I've been up to the Valbella several times, and I often go outside of the Valbella Fest. And when you go outside of Valbella Fest, you're pretty much the only one up there. And then it's absolutely sublime. It's just you and the wind, and a whole lot of you feel that frisson of what maybe drove people to kind of create the rituals that they did when you're up there alone. But it's totally different during the beer fest, but it's no less magical.
What beer should we keep an eye out for at this one?
You're gonna see beers from some of the local breweries. When I say local, I mean like Forchheim, which I mentioned you can walk to. So you might see Greif, Greif, or you might see Neder, Neder, or maybe from a little bit further points a little bit further east. If you've walked in from Ebermannstadt, you've hiked through Pretzfeld, and Nikelbräu is in Pretzfeld, and so Nikel, Nikl. So they're all there. You'll see various other breweries, and if you've ever really wanted to get a sense of what Franconian beer is all about, I would say maybe start with the local stuff like Greif or Neder or Nikelbräu, and then just see what else is out there. Like some of my favorites over the years, like Brauerei Ott, OTT. They have a really nice, just richly textured export beer that I've had at the festival. Another one that really stands out in my memory is from Penning Zeisler, and they have a really nice Vollbier, which means a full. It's kind of beers. It's an amber orange beer that just really has it really is kind of the epitome of Franconian beer. Now, I will add that there is some rumor afoot that Penning Zeisler they've closed the Wirtshaus, their tavern, which isn't too far from the Valbella. And so what we don't know, and what I need to try to confirm when I'm back in Europe this fall is if they're still brewing. And that's one of the natures of the beasts with Franconian breweries that have been in the family for generations. Sometimes they don't have the people to come along, the kids. They want to go live in Munich or the big city or Berlin. They don't want to sit there in some little village and run the family brewery.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But if you see Penning Zeisler, get it. It's awesome.
Moving on. Let's talk about the Cannstatter Volksfest in Stuttgart. Now, this is the one that I've been to personally. And this is the one where, you know, if you pick someone up who had never been to Oktoberfest in Munich
Yep.
and you put them down and said, "Where are you?" without any, you know, frame of reference or anything, this is the one that somebody would probably say, "I'm at Oktoberfest." This is probably what you'd say maybe Oktoberfest's twin. It's sibling, if you will.
That's a good way of putting it. I'm even loath to say it's like a smaller version of Oktoberfest. I mean, okay, Oktoberfest in any given year can welcome like upwards of 7 million people, but the Cannstatt Volksfest last year they welcomed 4.6 million visitors over their course of 17 days. That's a pretty good number. But here's where it's cool. It's really local. You're not, and this is what makes the Cannstatt Volksfest. You're absolutely right. You could be parachuted down into the Cannstatt Volksfest, be like, oh man, this is like Oktoberfest. Like there's Ferris wheels, there's beer tents, there's bands, there's people in Lederhosen and Dirndl, but you'd be hard pressed to hear any foreign language spoken whatsoever. This is a huge local festival that draws people in from the surrounding area. It's a little bit like I think like when you read old books about like the event that sort of defined a village or a town, you know, whether it's in the US or Canada or what have you, and people just looked forward to this whole thing like all year. And then when the festival came around, everyone gets kitted out and they go out and they just go for it, especially the young folks. This is a bit like this is what Cannstatt Volksfest is all about, and so this is the huge difference for me between the Oktoberfest and the Cannstatt Volksfest. Is Oktoberfest is awesome, and if you haven't been, you absolutely should go.
I want to make sure we're clear on this. We are not saying skip Oktoberfest. We're
No,
just saying after you've been a few times, these are the ones you want to supplement with.
totally, totally. And this, you know, this is like what again, what really makes the Cannstatt Volksfest so cool is it's young. Like most of the people there are in their 20s and 30s, and they are partying. They're partying hard. They've been looking forward to this all year, and they're all coming in from the surrounding countryside, and they're pre-gaming. They're pre-gaming. Like a quick little anecdote here. So I was staying in Ulm on the border of Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. Little insider tip, stay in Ulm, it's a lot cheaper. Take the train in. And I get on the train bright and early, 8 in the morning, and I sit down, I get in the train. It's packed with people in their 20s and 30s wearing lederhosen in Dirndl. And it's like as soon as the train lurched into motion, you hear this psh, pop, pop. Psh. Everyone's opening their beers at 8 in the morning, and everyone's like, you know, they start singing. It's just awesome.
Tell me about that train ride in from Ulm.
Oh man, that
It
that's
sounds
so fun.
scenic and full of fun.
Ulm, by the way, for people who love Trivial Pursuit, and maybe if you're looking to do like some beer trivia for your local tap room, what is the tallest church steeple in Germany? Yes, it is not Cologne, like most people think. It's Ulm. Ulm is worth visiting. It's a beautiful town, and it's about an hour away from Stuttgart. So you get on the train, and you pass this beautiful tall cathedral, and then you start winding your way up into the hills, and you're winding your way through the mountains. And then eventually you come out into another valley starts opening up. You join the Neckar Valley, and the Neckar, if anyone's been to Heidelberg, that's the river that flows to Heidelberg as well. It flows through Stuttgart as well. It flows through Tübingen. And then all of a sudden, you see these steep valley sides with vineyards. Another thing people might not know is that Stuttgart is also famous for its wine. So to keep on going past all these really wonderful old, like terraced vineyards and stuff, and then you get out at the train station in Stuttgart, and then you join the River of Humanity to get the local train or the subway to the Cannstatt Volksfest. And that's what I say about the pre-gaming. Like everyone, everyone is drinking. They're all trying to, because you know, beer fests, Oktoberfest can be a little expensive for a mug of beer. Cannstatt Volksfest is a little cheaper, but it's not cheap.
Great about this fest too is if for some reason you've showed up in Germany in
Mhm.
October, and you say to someone, I'm here for Oktoberfest, and they say to you, you know what, Oktoberfest ended. Well, guess what? This fest is in October.
It is. It is. Did you know, Scott, that my first ever Oktoberfest never happened?
I've heard this story.
For precisely that reason. I showed up to my first year abroad and studying in Germany in Saarbrücken and was all set. I arrived in Saarbrücken on October 1st, got settled into my apartment, was all set to go to Oktoberfest, and the woman who was coordinating international exchange students, she's like, "What are you doing this weekend?" I'm like, "I'm going to Oktoberfest." And she's like, kind of starts shaking her head. She's like, "I don't think you are going to Oktoberfest this weekend." Yeah.
So yeah, the Cannstatter Volksfest, the dates vary, but
Mhm.
typically it's like the first 2 weeks of October.
Pretty much, pretty much. This year for 2025, it starts on September 26th, but for all intents and purposes, you can bank on being able to go there for the first couple weeks of October. In case you miss Oktoberfest thinking it happens in October.
Which it's not crazy to come to that conclusion.
No, one would think.
I'll tell you what I remember the most about it outside of the tents, being similar to Oktoberfest and the food. We had a Swabian ravioli, which is like a stuffed dumpling.
Okay, yeah. Maltaschen.
Yeah, they told us Swabian ravioli. That was
Yeah.
good. But there was just some interesting little like rides and games that they had there, or like stands that seemed like they were really beloved by the locals. Like there was a diner that had been there for decades that is
Ah.
like beloved. And somehow we stumbled into this. It was like a two-level American style diner that's set up
Ah.
on the Cannstatter grounds. And then also they had boxing going on.
I think I probably should emphasize this as well. It's called the Cannstatter Volksfest, which is means a people's festival, and it is a people's festival through and through. It's lowbrow in the best sense of the word, which is why you would have a diner, which is why you'd have boxing, which is also why you've got instead of oompa bands, your classic oompa bands, you've got bands playing what they call in German Schlager, and this is like your Dieter techno, your sort of German pop. But that's the thing. It is a people's festival, and it's like the young kids. For them, it's maybe a little bit of nostalgia listening to the old Schlager and things like that. But it really is like it has that kind of that feel to it. It's a very workaday festival, and there's no pretense about it, and that's what's great about it. Like say, like people are dancing on the tables before noon.
Gotta love those people because they bring the energy. I can remember my wife and I, we had been there all day, and it was a long day, but we walked into one, and we made our way up to the second floor.
Mm.
It was the Stuttgarter Hofbrau,
Okay. Yep.
the one with the big beer glass outside. And we just stood up there and just watched these kids down on the tables, jumping up and down. And yeah, that's not me anymore. Well,
Yeah.
maybe on the right day it is, but just to see the energy there, just it kind of gets you then a little more energy.
Oh no, totally, totally. And that the Cannstatter Volksfest is its own kind of special little large world of 20 and 30 something energy. Whenever I go to Cannstatter Volksfest, it makes me feel 20 years younger. Like,
Well, that's a potion in itself. We'll take it.
yeah. Totally.
Yeah, so somebody you could make a case that maybe Oktoberfest in Munich is a bit more traditional. Maybe this one is a bit more new school and younger, but its heritage goes back just as far.
Oh yeah, no, so Oktoberfest got its start in 1810. It started off as a royal wedding, but also in subsequent years was an agricultural festival. And that was sort of the main draw, horse races and agricultural festival. Now, the Cannstatter Volksfest is similar as well in that sense. It got started in 1818, and it wasn't the result of a celebration like Oktoberfest. It was more, the harvest had failed miserably in 1816, and it just so coincided with Wilhelm I taking the throne. Württemberg had just been elevated to the status of a kingdom. He takes the throne in October of 1816, and he sees his subjects basically making do by cutting their flour with sawdust because they're on the verge of starvation. So he's like, what can I do to lift people's spirits, to also promote agriculture, and to just kind of make a mark at the beginning of my reign? One of the ideas he came up with was a Volksfest, which got its start in 1818. So it's a harvest festival. It's an agricultural festival. There were also horse races, and then eventually parades and the whole bit. As far as I've been able to tell in my research, it really endeared people to the king. And as you know, as was the case with Oktoberfest, eventually, you'd have people in, with these little stalls at the edge of the festival selling bratwurst and sauerkraut and beer, and then eventually, beer became the central focus.
As far as beer here, these brands of beer are probably not brands you've heard of.
Yeah,
And they're not totally ones you're probably going to see outside of Stuttgart, right?
No, no. That's the other interesting thing about the Cannstatter Volksfest. So if you go to if you've been to Oktoberfest, or if you go, one thing you'll notice is there's one kind of beer, and one kind of beer only, and it's Festbier. It's a golden beer that's about 5.8 to 6.2% alcohol. Wonderful beer. I love it. Totally love it. But that's all you can get, and they sell it by the liter, and it's great. It makes things very simple. Like, you just, no thinking involved. You just order your beer, and there you go. At the Cannstatter Volksfest, where it's a little bit different is you can get beer by the liter. Sometimes you can get it in 500 milliliter servings, and it's not just a fest beer. You can get Pils, you can get Hefeweizen, you can get Helles, you can get the gamut of sort of conventional German beers from a number of different local breweries. And if you're interested in regional beers, this is what makes the Cannstatter Volksfest maybe a little bit more interesting for you than Oktoberfest. Although I would, like, as we've been saying, we're not giving Oktoberfest short shrift at all. But
we don't want to get suspended.
No.
But yeah, and the cool thing about this is Stuttgart also is a very underrated place.
No, world-class museums, wine, Porsche and Mercedes, a lot, nice, interesting neighborhoods, some local breweries as well, like Stuttgarter Hofbräu, for example. Smaller little breweries. I mean, it's not a brewing powerhouse like Munich, but it's also topographically interesting too, with the hills and stuff like that. So it's a city worth visiting. It's one of Germany's major cities for a reason, I would say.
We should also mention that outside of this is the only fest we're mentioning that is not in Bavaria, that it's over here in Baden-Württemberg.
That is true. That is true.
We're all here in the southern section of Germany, but we're on the southwest here, as opposed to the southeast with Bavaria.
Yep. So in terms of, if you're trying to get a sense of geography in your head, if you've been to Heidelberg, if you've been to Freiburg, it's that kind of area. Stuttgart's a little bit north of the Black Forest, not too far away, but a little bit further north of the Black Forest, and not too far from France either.
Oh yeah, no, there's direct fast trains from Paris to Stuttgart. We're crawling back to our roots. We're crawling back to beloved Bavaria for our next fest, Salvatorfest.
This is a beer fest that is about one beer only, Doppelbock. And should you find yourself at this wonderful beer fest, I want to say this up front because you need to know this. They serve Salvator, a 7.9% ABV beer, by the liter. be aware of that. I speak from experience. And I'm sure anyone who's ever attended that festival will share that same bit of sage advice with you. This is a 7.9% beer sold by the leader.
So this is the definition of a marathon, not a sprint.
uh, yeah, yeah, that's one way of putting it, although way too many of us kind of sprint through it.
So this is in Munich, and there's a pretty interesting backstory here.
Oh yeah, yeah. With all these festivals. But this one is maybe one of the most interesting. I mean, unless you like witches and pagans and things like that.
We're here for it all.
But this one goes back to the establishment of the Paulaner monastery in Munich in 1634. And that date is neither here nor there, but that's when they founded it. And they founded it in a part of Munich, which is now today at the foot of the Nockherberg. And that on top of the Nockherberg is where you have the Salvatore Keller. Little, nice little walk up. It's the Salvatore Keller. It's one of the more famous beer gardens in Munich. It's a big part of Munich's cultural history. So the Paulaners, they decided at some point to start brewing a very, very nice, strong beer in honor of the feast day of their founder, Francesco di Paola, hence Paulaner. And his feast day was on April 2nd. So it just so happened that April 2nd usually coincides with Lent. This is a very big beer. There are a lot of stories surrounding what actually happened, but I always like to say, like, I am not, I'm a historian. I do like a lot of like what we could call serious history, but when it comes to beer, I am not a myth buster like a lot of beer historians are. I think that some of the myths and legends surrounding beer are kind of the spice of it all. What may or may not have happened is at some point they brewed this really, really strong beer as a tribute to their founder, but also as a way to get through Lent, because oil didn't break the fast. Apparently, they sent a couple kegs down to the Pope to get the Pope's blessing that they could actually drink this beer during Lent. And as rumor, or as the story goes, the beer soured between Munich and Rome, and the Pope drank this beer, and he's like, if these monks are fine drinking this swill, this is as good a penance as there is. So sure, they can drink this in Lent all they want. So they started, they had papal dispensation to drink this beer. It was known as liquid bread. What they were drinking is a richer, more nutritional beer that would actually help carry them through the fast. Sweeter, more nourishing, more nutritious, and maybe with a little bit more alcohol, was also very tasty. And so people started streaming across the river to the monastery and then eventually up to the Salvatore Keller to drink this beer every year when it was tapped around the time of the feast of St. Franz von Paula, Francesco de Paula. It became a cultural phenomenon. Eventually became the site of like political cabaret. There was also in 1888 a riot that started. They call it the Salvatore Beer Riots. Someone assaulted a service member at the Salvatore Keller, and then a riot broke out. It's a very carnivalesque festival, and to this day, it still kind of has that aspect. So it all dates back to Brother Barnabas started a tradition of presenting the first mug of beer. This is in the late 1700s. The first mug of beer to the Prince Elector, and so that kicked off the festival, and eventually it became a ritualized kind of thing that is still carried on today, where the head brewer of Paulaner presents the Minister of Economics for Bavaria the first beer. But it also gave rise to something called this is a very Munich dialect word, der Blecken, kind of a political cabaret where It might be a famous musician, it might be a famous comedian, it might be a famous, these days, maybe radio or TV personality who would give the Salvatore blessing in air quotes, in the persona of brother Barnabas. But it's a way to just really, it's a political roast. It's a satire of the politicians, of any sort of prominent personages in Munich. It's nowadays it's broadcast live to all of Germany during the opening of the festival. It's a big cultural thing, and it all sort of dates back to, we can trace the line from the Paulaner friars through the brewing of Doppelbock in honor of Francesco di Paola, to Brother Barnabas, to current day. It's huge in Munich cultural history. Nowadays, it takes place at the Salvatore Keller atop the Nockherberg. This is one of Munich's classic beer cellars. So there's this big explosion of building beer cellars in the 19th century, basically in areas that were either bluffs along rivers, and in this case, the Nockherberg is a bit of a rise above. Topographically, you can see it. And so they'd sink cellars in those places and to lager the beer. And the Paulaner brewery was basically just at the foot of this little rise, and so they would lager the beer in there, and then had a beer garden up top, and that's where they would hold the festival, and that's where they still hold the festival to this day. So if you go there nowadays, if it's warm outside, you can go have your liter of Doppelbock in the sunshine, which I don't advise. Or you can join the thousands of revelers in the beer hall. A little bit of an insider tip: if you are a fan of Doppelbock, the Löwenbräu releases their Triumphator during that what's called Stockbierzeit, the season of strong beer, as does the local legend Augustiner. They have their Maximator, which is available at the Augustiner Keller. And this is another little insider tip that stretches beyond the season of strong beer. Paulaner, it's a large brewery, and it's currently owned by Heineken, or controlled by Heineken, but within Munich itself, they have these little satellites, one of which is the Salvatore Keller, Paulaner am Nockherberg, as they call it today. And there's also the Paulaner Brauhaus closer to the Oktoberfest grounds. And at both of these places, they have on-site beers that you can only get at those particular sites. So, if you want to drink something that's a little bit outside of the line of your typical Paulaner beer that you'll see in bottle shops, go to the Salvatore Keller or go to the Paulaner Brauhaus, and there'll always be at least one beer that is brewed. They have pilot systems, and they brew the beers there, and they're really good.
What is the gap between the train and the platform?
Okay, well, I just wanted to take a second to say thanks for listening to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. I hope you're enjoying this episode and that it's helping you get excited for your next European adventure. Be sure to check out the link in the episode description, because there you'll find all the information you need if you decide to follow up on the places and topics that came up on the show. Oh yeah, if you are digging the podcast and you had a spare minute, I'd be forever grateful if you were to leave a review or a rating on the platform you're listening on, as those little things do go a long way. And if you really want to get crazy, why not give me a follow on Instagram or Facebook at Rails, Ales, Old Towns. Back to the show.
What is the gap between the train and the platform?
All right, so now we're heading to Munich Hauptbahnhof. We're heading there, and I got to give a shout out to my boys at the station. This was back during an Oktoberfest. I never had tuna on a pizza before, not once in my life. And I was making my way around the station after a day at the Oktoberfest. And you know what? By golly, they had a tuna fish and onion pizza that looked so good. The onions were thin, sliced so thin, had a little bit of char on them. I decided to give it a go right then and there. Devoured it, loved it. Went back to Oktoberfest a couple years later. They were still selling it and the same thing. So I don't know if they're still around, but if I'm going to Munich, Hoppenhof, I'm either getting a pretzel in the station for the train or I'm grabbing a slice of tuna and onion pizza and I'm heading to Bamberg for the next fest.
I'll add one layer on top of that. If you want some, as they call it in German, Wegbier, beer for the road, stop off at Yorma's. It's a chain, and they're in all the train stations. Every Yorma's sells beer from that particular city or region. You can stock up on decent beer for the ride to Bamberg, where we're going next.
Yeah, Yorma's, that place was my savior. You can grab yourself a quick sausage, cans of beer. It's essentially a 7-Eleven type thing. We've hopped on the train and we are heading north to Bamberg. We're still in Bavaria. We're in that mecca of Franconia.
Next up, Bamberg. So I want to say just a few quick words about Bamberg itself and why we chose to talk about the Sandkerva, which is the festival we'll be talking about. Now, I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you might have been to Bamberg. But let's assume you haven't been to Bamberg. There are all sorts of reasons to go to Bamberg, even outside of this festival. It is an old ecclesiastical center. It's called the Rome of the North. It's spread out over 7 hills. Very beautiful architecture and an extremely well preserved old town. So that's the main reason to go. But if you're a beer fan, there's another reason to go, and that's called Rauchbier, or smoke beer. And what that is, it is what exactly what it sounds like. It's beer that is made with malt grain that has been dried over an open fire, so in the malting process. And there are only 2 breweries in the world that still practice this traditional way of malting, and that is Schlenkela and Spezial, both of them in Bamberg. And they make 2 very different kinds of Rauchbier, or smoke beer. So that in itself, I mean, the cultural history of Bamberg plus the cultural history of beer, that in itself is a total reason to go to Bamberg. In addition to that, Bamberg, depending on how you count, the breweries at a given moment in time has anywhere between 10 and 14 breweries. So that is quite an astounding number for a town of 70,000 people. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And all of these not all of them do smoke beer, but they all do, most of them do knock it out of the park Franconian beer. So that's your reason to go to Bamberg. Now we're going to talk about Sandkerva.
When does it happen?
When does it happen? It happens in late August. And the dates are sort of, free floating. 5 days in late August this year, 21st of August to the 25th of August. Okay, the Sandkerva is always at the end of August. It is celebrated around the time. So Kerva, Kirtag, Kirchweih, these are all variations of a word which means a church dedication or consecration celebration. Again, this is what makes these festivals so interesting, is there's always this not always, but almost always an ostensibly religious connection to go and drink beer. And so in this case, it surrounds the consecration of the little chapel of St. Elizabeth in Bamberg. This was essentially a time when people would come together for a parish festival to, celebrate the saint, the church, maybe have some beer. In the case of Bamberg, so it's called Sandkerva. So Sand is basically the region, the district of Bamberg where the Saint Elizabeth Chapel is in the Sand. It's so that's why it's called Sandkeva. It's in honor of Saint Elizabeth, ostensibly. But
But, big but.
Bamberg, Bamberg being Bamberg and Franconians being the beer drinkers that they are, they turned the entire Altstadt, the old town of Bamberg, into a beer festival. It's an open air beer festival where you have Oompa bands pretty much in every shaded square. You have little beer carts, beer stands, beer trailers, you name it. Little mini beer tents everywhere. And it's a celebration of everything Franconian beer. Bamberg's a magical city, and this just kind of, for me, it kind of takes it up a notch. Like I remember, like, the first time I went to Sankeva, maybe about a decade ago. I just remember taking the train from Munich, walking, through the city towards the old town, and then you get to this point where the entire old town opens up, and you just see like beer tents everywhere, and like on all the bridges, and it's wonderful.
Now, when you're saying beer tents here, you're talking more like small little tents where they're just serving beer and then people are just walking with the beer.
We're talking little makeshift shelters that would blow away in a big wind. Like
So this is a buy a beer at the point of sale and then walk with it.
walk with it, hang out, watch, like, you know, you'll have like the various local umpa bands. You'll have like various high school choirs coming out and performing. You'll have like all sorts of these kinds of things, and you just grab a beer and start talking to the person next to you. For me, like, I said the Wabele Fest is my favorite beer fest, and it is. But the Sandkeva, like, if you're a beer lover, this is the beer fest for you. If you're a beer lover, like the range of beers is just extraordinary. Like I said, you've got pretty much every Bamberg brewery present at the festival, and then you have like some of the top tier breweries from around the Upper Franconian region. People talk about Franconian beer all the time and how awesome it is. And if you really wanted to get a sense of why people think that, Sandkeva is probably one of the best beer festivals to do that.
Now I want to hear about this jousting on the river.
Oh, that um, that's what makes this beer festival extra special. So the beer fest just happens over like 5 days, but then you've got this water joust on the river called the Fischestechen. This goes back to an old medieval tradition. So you have the various you have the fishermen's guilds, you have the boatsmen's guilds, and they all had their headquarters in the Sund near the chapel of Saint Elizabeth. So they've been doing these jousts for centuries. And so interestingly, I mean, they've had the Keva for the Saint Elizabeth chapel for ages, but only turned it into a beer festival in 1951 in the wake of World War II. Obviously, time when you want to kind of get people recharge their spirits a little bit. So, but they had the first edition. They're like, it's kind of missing something. And now every year on the Saturday of the festival, you'll start to notice, like, just as you think that the Altstadt can hold no more people, all of a sudden people just start sort of drifting out towards the river, and then at 3 p.m. they start with the river joust, and they get on these old kind of like, the best I can describe it is it looks like a cross between a kayak and a canoe. And
Okay.
you got someone like in the back kind of steering thing, and then you got someone in the front with like a pole. Maybe back in the day it was pointed, I don't know, but so they try and knock the opposing jouster off into the river. And so it's great fun. And they have like bands cheering people on, and it's just another reason, on top of every other reason to go to Bamberg for Sandkipper. It's just, it makes it festival what it is.
Well, yeah, and this Bamberg, I've never been there. I hate to say it, but I'm embarrassed almost.
No way.
Sorry, sorry. I apologize to my family and the good people of Bamberg. This is something I'll learn from, and I am addressing things and I'm making steps to be better in the future. It's so famous in the beer circles, but yet it's still just completely under the radar in the wider world. And as you've mentioned, even if you're not even into beer, there's actually a lot to know and want to go to this city for.
Yeah, no, totally. It's a beautiful city. You need to get yourself to Bamberg, Fort Worth tomorrow.
I'll tell you what, the first time I ever heard of Bamberg, there was a show that
Mhm.
really inspired me. It was called The Thirsty Traveler. A
Wow.
gentleman named Kevin Brock, Canadian. It was a Canadian show.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and they toured all around and basically introduced me to a ton of stuff around the world. Like, but the one that pertains to Bamberg, they did an episode on Bamberg. I don't remember. I remember the smoked beer and being
Mhm.
introduced to that, but they visited a place that did a famous onion.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Yep. That is Schlenkela.
Okay. And
Bamberg Zwiebel.
I just remember seeing this onion
Yep.
and saying, I've got to get my hands on that. And that was 20 years later, and I still haven't. But
Mm,
one day I will. They're still selling the stuffed onions?
they are. They've gotten smaller, unfortunately. Shrinkflation. But Bamberg is a UNESCO heritage city for a number of reasons. One of which is the fact that it is, I believe, the has the largest proportion of urban acreage given over to farming compared to any other city in the world. And so they still have this old farming tradition and two crops for which Bamberg were famous. Hops, later was a third one, but two for which they're famous are the onion, the humble onion, and they make a lot of it. And they make a big thing of it too with the Bamberger Zwiebel, and it's featured in a lot of dishes. And licorice. Licorice is another crop that they grow.
Yeah, these onions, from what I remember on the show, they were like stuffed with meat and
Yeah,
they're,
yeah.
they're
Wrapped in bacon.
we're down to one festival, German beer festival, beyond Oktoberfest.
Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, okay. This festival is part of Oktoberfest, but it's so overlooked that you could almost make a case that it is its own festival.
And it is called Oidewiesen. And it is, yeah, you're absolutely right, Scott, that you could almost make a case that this is a beer festival in its own right. Now, it happens on the Oktoberfest grounds during Oktoberfest. And Oidewiesen just basically translates into English as the old meadow. The old school Oktoberfest is really one way of thinking about it. It's wonderful. If you're willing to pay an extra €4, because it's kind of hived off from the rest of the Oktoberfest grounds, you pay an extra €4 and you go in, and it really is. It's a little bit of that old magical nostalgia of an Oktoberfest that I've never been to. But you go in there and you've got these beer tents that are kind of roughly hewn. They're more like actual tents than the big, huge 3,000, 4,000 seat affairs or larger that you've got on the rest of the Wiesen. It's like timber beam everywhere with like canvas stretched top. And they feel more like a tent with a lot of wood. And also, you have all of the old school kind of. You talked a little bit about the stuff at the Cannstatter Volksfest. So you've got like some of these throwback things at the Oide Wiesen as well. So you have strength test, so you can walk up and get like one of these hammers and go boing and like ring the bell. So you do like the shooting galleries. They also have old, and this is something that kind of for me is a little bit nostalgic because I'm Canadian of Swiss descent, and so when I would go back with my family, as a teenager to my dad's village in Switzerland, they would have these Kegelbahns, bowling alleys, and my brother and I would always call them like Fred Flintstone bowling alleys because they have these chunky bowling balls, and it's not like bowling that we know here in Canada and the US. It's a different kind of bowling, and they're these old. The best way you can say it, like you toss the ball and it goes like clunk, 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 like like it's very rustic, and so they have the old Kegelbahns in at the Oida Wiesen too, and you can go and like get these old like Fred Flintstone bowling balls and toss them down, and different rules than what we have here, but a lot of fun, a lot of fun, and they have a velodrome in one of the tents where people ride around on unicycles and things like that. They have oh
Really?
man, it's just such a trip. Like
So the people who've been drinking beer getting on unicycles.
fortunately not. People that actually can ride a unicycle and ride around
Oh, they're just doing it as a show.
as a show. Yeah, maybe they've
Okay.
had a few beers before. I don't know, but I certainly I myself wouldn't want to be trying out the unicycles festival.
Okay, so yeah, so this is a section of Oktoberfest that is
Yep.
dedicated to a retro feeling, old school, vintage,
Yep.
throwback, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And there are beer tents.
The one with the velodrome is a Spaten tent. Um, and there's another tent that I really love. It's called the Traditionsfestzelt, the traditional festival tent, and that's a tent run by Augustiner, and they have, instead of the glass liter glasses that you get at Oktoberfest, they have the old ceramic mugs with old font on them, kind of thing. So it's just different enough from what you're gonna get at on the Oktoberfest grounds proper that you could almost call it a different festival. And also the rides too. They have like the old merry-go-rounds, like old fashioned. I think they're the actual old vintage merry-go-rounds from several decades back. They also have other rides that they would have had. They also have like I remember when I was a little kid going to amusement parks and you get on these old cars and stuff, and they have like things like that where in this case it's old Mercedes and BMWs riding around for the kids.
Of course.
Yeah. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. It like I said, like I I didn't go to Oktoberfest as a kid. I've only been there as an adult, but I would hazard to guess that just sort of, and also just watching the people there, like the locals, they just seem to be, there's this sort of sense of like, wow, like I remember like something like kind of fun from my past.
This isn't just about drinking beer. It's about getting to know this country and these regions intimately through these
Yeah.
festivals.
No, and also just kind of, maybe a word in closing apropos of that. Like there's so many of these beer festivals around Germany, especially in southern Germany, the Harvest Fests in any given little village or larger town in Bavaria between late August and maybe late September. Search them out, go to them. They are wonderful. And they really are these kinds of places where you're just like, you're looking around, you're like, I can't believe I'm here. And they're serving the beer, whether it's from the city or the town or the region, they're all very localized. You're gonna meet different people at each one, and you will meet people. You absolutely will, because that's the nature of these festivals. It's communal seating. You'll sit down, and then someone will start talking to you, and if you're receptive enough to the conversation, you can start finding out like what, makes this little village tick. You'll find out their stories too. They absolutely want to hear yours as well. And keep that in mind. Like, don't just sit there kind of like, oh man, I can't speak any German. Like, the Germans are very welcoming, and this is something I think we forget, especially when you're in southern Germany, Bavaria or Baden-Württemberg. They're so friendly, and they really do want to hear your story. So, grab a beer and talk to them.
Franz, thanks for coming back. Everybody, Tempest in a Tankard, the website, follow Franz on social media. Great for inspiration for anyone that loves beer and loves Europe.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thoroughly enjoyed it, as always.
Prost.
Prost.